Pathfinder is all about fighting monsters. You both have hit points, that's HP, which represents how alive you are, and you take turns hitting each other until someone hits 0 HP. That creature dies, and you win! But it's a lot more interesting than that. Sometimes there will be 2 enemies, and you are there with your friends. All of this combat takes place on a battle mat. Each square represents 5 feet. On your turn, you get 3 actions and 1 reaction. 3 actions, 1 reaction. The most basic of these actions are stride, that's moving, and strike, that's hitting the enemy. Stride, you move up to your speed. Strike, you attack something. Remember, you have 3 actions, and you can do this in any order on your turn. You can stride, strike, stride. You can stride, strike, strike again at a penalty. You could strike 3 times in a row, again with more penalties. Or you could strike, stride, and do some other action, like eat some cheese. Oh yeah. To perform almost any difficult action requires step number 2. Roll a 20-sided die and add modifiers to exceed a difficulty class number. You roll a d20, a 20-sided die, and you add numbers to make that number as big as possible. For example, let's say you want to jump across this chasm. You roll a d20 and add relevant modifiers. In this case, your game master might tell you to roll athletics. The chasm is not that wide, so we'll give it a difficulty class, a DC of 10, which means you need to meet or exceed a DC 10. But let's say the chasm is even farther apart. Now the DC is 15, it's more difficult. So you roll your d20, you get a 14, that's not enough. But you add your athletics, let's say it's a 3, and you get 17. That means you can succeed at jumping across the chasm. The third step that you must always keep in mind is that if you exceed the DC by 10, it's a critical success. But if you fail by 10, it's a critical fail. That means you don't just want to meet or exceed the DC, you want to exceed it by as much as possible, which means you always want to get those modifiers as big as possible. Let's say that you want to strike a goblin. You roll your d20. You'll add your relevant modifiers. On your character sheet, that's that first number here. You don't even really need to know where it comes from after you make your character. Once you make your character and write down that number, all you need to know is that that is the number you add to your d20 roll on an attack. Let's say the goblin has an AC of 16. AC stands for armor class, and it's the difficulty class that you need to meet or exceed in order to successfully strike an opponent. If you roll a d20 with a +6 and you need to meet or exceed a 16, you have a 55% chance of succeeding, and a 5% chance on top of that for a critical success. The odds are not bad. If you succeed, you can roll this second number, 1d8 plus 3, or whatever it is on your character sheet, and by that much you can reduce the opponent's hit points. Oof, that's gotta hurt. If you critically succeed a strike, you can double that number. Double damage. There is one other way to get lucky with a d20 roll. Let's say you're rolling against an AC of 19. You get an 8. You add 6, it's a failure. You roll a 19, you add a 6, it's a success. You roll a 20, you add a 6, it's a success. But wait, rolling a 20 on a d20 is special. It doesn't matter what your result is, it will always upgrade your success level by 1 step. That means your success becomes a critical success. However, if you roll a natural 1, your level of success will go down by 1 step. This is a lucky situation, and in general, you always want to be focused on making this number as big as possible and this number as small as possible. We'll now introduce 3 techniques that can help make that happen: flanking, taking cover, and the multiple attack penalty. First, let's talk about flanking. Remember, you are on a battle mat with your friends fighting against monsters and their friends, which means you can use your friends to help you. Let's say your friend has finished their turn, and as one of their actions, they moved right here next to the goblin. On your turn, you then choose to stride and go to the opposite side of the goblin, flanking that goblin. If you are on opposite sides of the goblin, they take a -2 penalty to their AC from being off guard. What does that mean? The goblin's AC has now been reduced from 16 to 14. That means your 55% chance of success and 5% chance of critical success has just gone up to 65% and 15%. Much better. We can now talk about the second thing we can do: take cover. This takes 1 action, hence the symbol. Let's say you used your first action to stride, and you used your second action to strike. Well, what should you do for your third action? It of course depends on the environment, but let's say you have moved right next to this tree, or some kind of object on the battle mat. That means that you could potentially use the action to take cover. In most situations, this will give you a +2 to your AC. Now look at what has happened in 1 single turn. First, you reduced the goblin's AC to 14 by flanking. Then you hit the goblin and reduced their HP. Now you've taken cover, increasing your own AC. This would be a very effective turn. Now we can talk about the third thing: multiple attack penalty. In this situation, we first did a stride, then a strike, and then take cover. But what if instead of take cover, we want to strike a second time? Seems like a good idea if you're trying to reduce the enemy's hit points as as much as possible. What you have to remember is that within your turn, every strike you take incurs another -5 penalty. That means the second strike you do is at a -5 penalty, and the third is a -10 penalty. Let's say you want to strike the goblin for a second time. Well, that means your +6 to your D20 roll will be reduced by 5 to a +1. That reduces your 65% chance of success and 15% chance of critical success to a 40% and a 5% chance in case of a natural 20, respectively. The second strike is significantly less likely to succeed. Let's say in a hypothetical situation you want to strike for a third time. That would again reduce your modifier by 5. That means you're down to a 15% chance of success. Each subsequent strike is less and less effective. That's why it's very often more useful on your third action not to strike again or strike 3 times in a row, but flank or take cover to give yourself other bonuses that could help you in the fight against the goblins. Combat is all about taking turns hitting each other, but in a battle you have friends. The opponent has friends, and the opponent's friends have friends. Who takes their turn first? At the beginning of combat, the game master will tell you to roll initiative. You roll a D20 plus a modifier, which the game master will tell you. Normally, it's your perception bonus. The results determine the turn order. Let's start from the beginning and recap. You're walking through the forest when you encounter hostile goblins. Everyone rolls initiative to determine the turn order. On your turn, you get 3 actions and 1 reaction. Actions you can take include stride, which you can use to flank, strike, and take cover. Your goal is to reduce the opponent's HP to 0, which can be done with a strike by meeting or exceeding the opponent's AC with an attack roll. However, every subsequent strike is more and more difficult to hit. Therefore, it can be more strategic to use additional actions to flank or take cover. There's always a benefit to having a high modifier, since if you beat a creature's AC by more than 10, you do double damage.